Hi guys, so Corsair released a full-size hardware keyboard called the Vanguard Pro 96 and I've been checking it out for the past weeks. I'm mostly a 60% keyboard guy myself, but this keyboard intrigued me since it is actually quite a compact layout even though it has a full numpad going on here. Here is my Venom 68G for comparison, and the Corsair board is pretty much sized as a TKL board, which is pretty nice. It also does come with a Nordic layout that I have here. Personally, I have adapted fully to the ANSI layout even though I am from Finland, and for me the small shift key feels kind of weird, but many people don't want to make that adjustment, which is totally understandable. I swapped to ANSI when I first started building keyboards years ago, since keycap availability was kind of bad for Nordic layouts. There were no Max Gaming at the time and I didn't want to pay insane amounts for extra kits. So yeah, full-size layout, a knob, a screen and some macro buttons is what this keyboard offers. It does also come with this wrist rest that is magnetic and it just clips on like this. Pretty neat if you are a fan of wrist rests, I'd say. The case is plastic all around and there are adjustable feet that swap the typing angle between around 2 degrees and 6 degrees. This keyboard is quite a high profile to the point it's not that ergonomic to use, at least for me, but it depends on what you have used to really. As you can see, the USB port placement is kind of weird and I don't really understand why they went with this, other than, yeah, you have the possibility to route the cable from different angles, but it's kind of a gimmick that makes using third-party cables and no-go, since the routing method is kind of tight there. I don't want to use a really high-quality cable that gets bunched up between these plastic nubbins there. And yeah, it's it's like on the bottom of the keyboard. Yeah, this is just pretty weird. Then the keycaps. They were surprisingly good PBT keycaps with some pretty rough texture. They are dual shot PBT with the inner layer being the transparent type to get the RGB glow going. The legends are quite uniform and they suit the gamer aesthetic of this board quite nicely. The switch they have used are their MGX hyperdrive switches and they were a big surprise to me. They have a pretty minimal wobble and the stock looping also seems to be decent. They have a dual rail structure that has become the go-to solution these days, and the travel distance is 4mm. The stabs for the most part are good. The spacebar especially is quite decently looped and tuned, but the backspace and the large enter key could use some more fine tuning since they are a bit mushy. However, they are better than I expected. Inside the board you have 4-layer sound dampening with the porcelain foam and silicone, which makes the typing sound quite good for a big brand gaming keyboard. Here is a sound test. The board also does have some flexiness due to the all plastic structure. It is not that soft like you feel on gasket mounted keyboards, but the middle goes down a bit if you put some pressure to it, resulting in a slightly bouncy typing feel. On the board you can set up a uniform travel distance setting without a driver and some other things like your brightness. So with those the screen does come handy. You can also set up a custom picture to show on the screen, which is nice. The knob acts as a multifunction controller and the function changes if you cycle between different stuff with the function key and the F row keys. I believe it's the F12 that lets you swap the widget. With the stock setting it acts as a volume controller and has a mute button when the button is pressed. On software you have pretty much everything you need, with some good explanations of what is what. There is no dead zone setting as far as I know, but I believe it is quite minimal since with 0.1mm actuation the board is very sensitive, especially with rapid trigger on, which you can set up very nicely as well to your liking. To change the board's polling rate with normal use you need to go to the device settings and change it there since it is set at 1000 Hz by default, and swap to 8K polling if you enabled game mode with the button. Currently, setting up the game mode is bugged since you only have the ability to set a uniform setting for actuation point and rapid trigger. You cannot select particular keys here even though the driver says that you can. You can do that in normal mode, which is what I've been using. For latency measurements, I sadly have to tell you that it was a no-go with the XLAT. The board just demands too much power for the XLAT to power it fully because it has a screen and it is bigger, so no results came through. For what it's worth, I didn't notice the board to be meaningfully less responsive in games, and especially with a game like Battlefield 6, you don't really benefit from a super responsive keyboard that much. Super glides in Apex were doable but harder for me due to the higher profile of the keyboard, but with more time I could definitely make it work there as well if I'd want to. Then lastly, I want to talk about the Elgato Stream Deck integration. That is one thing that made me want to review this keyboard. From the early marketing material, it sounded like there would be an actual Stream Deck built inside the board, and I thought it would utilize the screen as well, which would have been awesome. In reality, you have an Elgato Stream Deck button on the board, and when you press it, it just prompts you to download and install Virtual Stream Deck app and shows the exact same text even after you install the program. I believe this should open the application, but currently you must set that yourself in the Virtual Stream Deck app. On the Virtual Stream Deck app, there is no mention of this board at all, and it doesn't recognize the side buttons as viable hotkeys before you set those hotkeys to act as a button combination or something else in the web driver. So this whole integration is a bit of a bummer since you could do these things literally with every other keyboard. It just seems to be a marketing gimmick that they didn't fully develop, and their wording about it is very misleading. The manual of this keyboard don't really tell you any of this, so I'd imagine a lot of people will be very pissed if they thought they could get a Stream Deck and a keyboard in a single package. But yeah, other than that, this is a decent Hall effect keyboard and definitely a viable option if you absolutely need a full-sized keyboard with Hall effect technology. The layout is pretty compact for a full-sized board, which is nice. As a bit of an enthusiast in the hobby, I don't really dig the whole gamer aesthetic that much, and the price of $230 or euros is quite steep since you could just get a wooden ADHE with the price and be much more happy. But you know, if you need a numpad, this is probably your only option. Thanks for watching, that is about it. See you at the next one. Goodbye.